So China's now telling the WHO to focus on whether COVID-19 may have emerged first in other countries. Governments around the world are slamming this report. They call it Wuhan whitewash, some of them. So David Asher, who is an investigator who's uncovered nuclear weapons organizations, all kinds of things in Republican and Democrat governments over the last 20 years. He was in charge of looking into the origins of the virus. He joined us yesterday, and he sounded the alarm on what he says is a Chinese bioweapons program.
But what we learned was so horrifying about the implications of what China is doing with viruses as a weapons vector. Many people said, oh, viruses aren't a very effective weapons vector. Well, look what's happened to the world.
Republican Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas is a member of the Intelligence Committee, an outspoken critic of China's handling of the pandemic, and says that evidence suggests that COVID originated from an accidental lab breach. Senator, thank you very much for being here. You have been sounding this alarm, as I said, for some time. Secretary of State, the former Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, has been sounding the alarm on the specifics that he hasn't always been able to shed more light on. This person, David Asher, worked at the State Department as part of that investigative team. What did you think of what he had to say?
Well, I think it's very interesting, and I think it sheds light on this World Health Organization report that even the Biden administration and a lot of our allies say is little more than whitewashing Chinese culpability and unleashing this plague on the world. Remember, the World Health Organization, its director, are obsequious sycophants to the Communist Party in Beijing. As I've said now for more than a year, all the evidence we have points to the laboratories in Wuhan, not some open-air food market in which more than half of the original cases didn't even have any contact with. If you look at what China has done in destroying the early evidence about the origins of this outbreak, how they wouldn't allow access to the scientists or to those laboratories, and then when we finally had a WHO team go there a couple months ago, I mean, they basically sat in a conference room, had some coffee and donuts, were given some PowerPoint slides, and they said nothing to see here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure why everyone anticipates this WHO report so highly, or really, reads into it in a way that it's clearly not an unbiased report. It basically scatters, blame and vagueness all over the course of this whole scene. But what really matters is, and this is something that Bill Gertz brought up last night when he was talking to Tucker Carlson, he said, this is an effective weapon, whether it was leaked intentionally or not. It's quite clear now that it is an effective weapon. It killed millions of people. More than 500,000 in this country alone. So what do we have to be looking forward to? What do we have to be savvy about what next? What else might be coming our way?
Well, Martha, I've said all along, the simplest explanation is that this was an accidental leak from these labs. Look, laboratory leaks happen.
Yep.
You hope they don't, but they happen. They even happen in the United States, but they especially have a history of happening in China. And U.S. diplomats were in this lab in 2018, and they raised grave alarms about the safety practices. One thing that we should stop doing is ever again funding Chinese laboratories. I know that Dr. Fauci has doubted that it could have come from this laboratory. He's the last person we need to try to reassure the American people on this point, because it was his agency that was providing funding for this kind of research at the laboratories in Wuhan. So the American people should no longer be funding any Chinese laboratory, to be sure.
Yeah, it's a great point. Here's one more quick soundbite from Mr. Asher. I want to get your thoughts on it on the other side.
This virus is like 3 to 4 generations away from anything occurring in nature. No one would ever deliberately create something like this that turned into a Frankenstein without being a mad scientist.
So the suggestion is that it has this gain-of-function ability, this virus, which basically helps it to cleave into human cells more easily than a naturally occurring virus. Do you believe that's what happened?
Well, we know that they were doing gain-of-function research in the Wuhan labs. I'm not a scientist, so I can't say conclusively what happened, but we know that this lab has a long history of shoddy, sloppy practices as identified by diplomats just 2.5 years ago.
Senator Cotton, thank you very much on this early on, we should point out, and it's looking more and more like you were onto something. So we'll keep digging. Thank you very much, Senator. Good to see you.
Thank you.